And when did we first talk about this? A couple months ago? Like, I mean, basically what happened was, I guess I'll give you some background before I go sort of into my path on this. I'm from Pittsburgh originally, and so I made stuff pretty much my whole life. The last thing I made was turbocharger systems for race cars, and it was a huge bitch to like get anything made. And this is when I started realizing, like, man, this is really difficult. And so I made Hack Pittsburgh, which is a hackerspace for Pittsburgh. And then, that was good times. And then I started getting all these equipment donations to like actually build the shop out. So I started meeting all the manufacturers in Pittsburgh and getting on their good side. And so people started asking me for sourcing stuff, And so then that evolved into a website called CloudFab. And then eventually we specialized in 3D printing. And then we started doing all these algorithms so we could price it and tell you if actually designed it correctly. Anyone use Pinocchio in here to source stuff? So if you use Pinocchio, you're actually using our software in the back end to source like 3D printing and the rest. And so then after CloudFab, we actually sold CloudFab recently for some injection molding software that we did. And then I started getting really involved in the hardware community for startups specifically. And so I was in San Francisco, I moved there, and I figured, there's got to be a hardware meetup, right? I mean, come on, it's San Francisco. And apparently that's not true. There wasn't one. So I started a startup meetup, and I thought, okay, we'll get like 10 people, we'll talk about this. The first one, we had 70 people come out, and I was like, shit, like, this is crazy, And we had like 30 pitches the first day. Like, everyone was bringing this crazy shit. It was amazing. And then from there, we just started having them every month, and now, there's like 1,000 people on the list, and we get like 150 people because we can't get any more in the room. And it's just crazy outgrowth. And then I've also been working out of Tech Shop. You guys know what Tech Shop is? It's like a huge hackerspace, more commercial, but lots more equipment and whatnot. And now we're starting to see tons of hardware startups just everywhere. Probably the same 100 people show up, and everyone's demos and everything are just lying around. It's pretty amazing. And now we're starting to actually outgrow the Tech Shop. And now there's a sort of category, called them pro makers, hardware startups, that we're starting to see actually figuring out like whatever we're talking about, how do we go to larger runs? And so, the sort of utopian side, open hardware and everything, says that, we're going to have 3D printers and replicators will print everything, but, we're a little premature on that. There's a lot of hype in 3D printing. And so I think the question is right now is prototyping. Think about how the internet happened, right? Stallman in '85 do Emacs, GCC, developer tools. And then we moved into 91 to 95, we had the LAMP stack was created. And now production of websites could begin. And so we have this sort of thing from dev tools to production that had to happen. And I think we're in the same thing with hardware. We have the 3D printers, the tech shops. We're almost at post-scarcity prototyping. For a couple grand a year, you can have all you want. It's like a laptop for getting into programming, right? And so as I see it, right now the issue is production. And everyone's saying this question, the gap between prototyping, a short-run gap, and then mass production. And how do we solve that? And I guess that's something I'm trying to figure out right now with what I'm doing next is, how can we do things? I'm really into robotic stuff for doing this. So I look at how we can do manufacturing lines automatically. What if you could compile to a manufacturing line and it would reconfigure itself without having to have humans do the jigs and work holding and all that kind of programming. So that's what I personally work on. But I don't really know how many good demos to show you, unfortunately. But I guess I just wanted to see what everyone thought. So are there questions, comments, or anything like that? What are you guys seeing? What's the New York scene like? I'm just trying to learn when I'm out here, really.
I think it's developing. I've been all around the country for the last 2 years, going through Boston, San Francisco, started in the Midwest, and that was dead. But in San Francisco, they've kind of found each other. In Boston, they're just starting to pull themselves together. In New York, it seems like you guys are really at the vanguard. It's not a lot, we're not being redundant at all. This is absolutely a bunch of interested people, excited, great resources that haven't collected yet. So that's what I see.
No, this is, the reason for the meetup group is sort of like what you're saying. In many ways, I feel like there's a quorum sensing in any group, and people were out there, they just didn't know each other existed. And then when you see this, you're like, shit, this is amazing. So that's good to hear. How about anyone else?
Yeah, I'm literally, I've been in this game for 5 years now. I started a tech company a couple of years ago, and I just couldn't get funding working for my hardware problems. I have 40 inventions that I developed over the years. You saw one.
Yeah.
And one of the things I found out about Wall Street, and I just said this to this gentleman over here, he's a patent attorney, they are as dumb as dirt when it comes to science and technology. When it comes directly to finance, New York is nothing but finance. Although it's all about the paper. Now, there's a lot of tech companies here, mind you, don't get me wrong. But at the same time, if Wall Street were to get off their ass and literally put more money directly into the tech world, especially here, all of us would be, we'd be on cloud cloud nine right now. And, you know, I had a conversation with one of the most powerful women directly in New York City. Her name is K.L. Fredericks. She runs the U.S. Commerce Department. Her boss actually reports to Obama. And, you know, we had a conversation in 2008, and she says, I said, listen, why can't they get a Silicon Valley over here, or some sort of hardware value over here for people to create, you know, innovative ideas? She said, well, they pitched it directly to Wall Street, but they never supported it about 20 years ago.
But you know, I think it's not just Wall Street though. Like, I don't think it's just, I mean, there's a few dynamics here, right? Silicon Valley, most investors are super skeptical of this too. I mean, it's only been in the past, like since Kickstarter
It's more
doing
a
$1
great
billion
story
raises.
out in California than it is here.
Yeah, I think that's probably
In
something
many
true.
respects.
But I think in many ways, like, I mean, if anyone's ever done the VC roadshow and everything, I mean, VCs want returns, right? And like right now, stuff like Zynga, you know, whether or not that has any societal value, is something where money comes out much quicker than hardware.
Right.
You know, so they have to follow that. So I mean, it's up to
that I
us
already know.
to produce products that produce revenue very often and get the shit good and having good successes so we can make this. There's not been one huge, big acquired, you know, thing that people can point to and say that's what it is.
Right.
And I think this is, you know, we're still very much building on that.
There is a process that I was just speaking to.
Could be that.
Excuse me?
Kiva, the Amazon floor management could be that.
So yeah, it's true. I mean, there's been traditional stuff for a while. I mean, like I think it's an interesting point. Like, do we consider them hardware startups? I guess they are, right? I mean, but they're really never in the community of what we would think of them as. I don't know when Kiva was like one guy with a robot, you know, doing warehousing. It must have happened at some point, right? But no one really points to it. It almost seems like, how do you define hardware? Like in many ways, it seems like it's what isn't in any other subcategory. We have clean tech, biotech. You know, those are sort of hardware fields, but you know, we don't define them that way.
So, you know, having come from the tech Wall Street world, I think the challenges New York has is you don't have the university infrastructure, right? Boston has
Technical
MIT,
university, you mean?
like Stanford and Berkeley has long history with the VC community.
Yep.
You know, you look at like Nicira, which was just bought by VMware
Yep.
for $1.25 billion. It was 4 professors at Stanford that came up with ideas. They left university, right? So at MIT, you know, there's a Boston community. So, you know, right now, the university structure here just doesn't have the tie-in to the startup community the way those two cities have. The other thing is, like you said, you need a couple of big hits. You need some hardware hardware startups to make significant returns so that, okay, let's fund them again in the next one. Let's fund them again in the next one. So I think, you know, there's some roadblocks, but, you know, it's not impossible. It's going to take time because those places still are going to capture more of the hardware money, where New York seems to be more social networking, media, and mobile apps right
But
now.
you know what? I mean, from being in San Francisco, I mean, it's a fluffy town. Like, I can't go to a software startup meetup without social mobile game mechanics with deals being said to me, you know, at some pitch at some point. It's really a filtering thing, you know. Like the good thing about these meetups is you can filter these people down to like 100 people or whatever who care, and then it works. I mean, you know, NYU ITP program is probably one of the best in the country for this sort of like maker kind of stuff. So many people. I mean, some of the big, like, you know, I know Little Bits in particular. I think, well, I was from MIT originally. And then she did work at ITP. I'm not sure.
But the difference is, like, so Cisco Systems, everybody heard of them?
Sure.
That was created in a Stanford lab, right? So Stanford students.
No, sure.
You know, so the ability to, you know, to have, and I'm not saying, you know, you need Stanford here, but there's so much that needs to happen here first, but it'll happen. It's just, you know, 5 years, 2 years, 10 years, I don't know. But that's why those cities capture a lot of the hardware.
No, for sure.
To flip that over, how much engagement in San Francisco do you see from large corporations that do hardware plays?
You mean like Google or something like this?
No, I mean like a Caterpillar, like even like a Cisco or something like that. John Deere.
So in those companies, and I know from Cat and John Deere specifically, I know they're way more, like I'm from Pittsburgh originally, so CMU, if you go to the NREC, the robotics center, you see those each in the stall. So I know they do university stuff. I've not really seen many people doing it direct, like corporate stuff with them.
Like, I mean, like, do they think as hardware startups as a pipeline for innovation for their next thing?
I mean, if we look at, say, 3D Systems, public company makes 3D printers, so, you know, sort of a big company, but not huge. They bought, what was it called, Rapman, for their 3D printing for FDM stuff internally. I guess there's that, but I don't know, I don't really see it. What are you thinking specifically?
I mean, I really see, like, you know, if you have a Google and a Yahoo in the hardware play, right, you can actually fuel that as a place to say, like, okay, I'm going to choose that hardware startup to buy, like, that's a great product I'm going to add to my space, things like that. And that kind of can fuel a big ecosystem.
For sure. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, right? With software, it seems that the acqui-hire thing sort of puts a bottom floor on what you can get if it's like, you know, 500 grand or $1 million an engineer for acquisition prices just for that. Do we have that in hardware? It's pretty crazy. I know our startup meetups, or our hardware ones, are sponsored by Fitbit and a couple of the larger companies that are trying to like basically poach everyone in the audience. You know, because they're trying to grow.
Yeah.
But you know, but that's just what it is, and that's actually probably healthy for a community to
Yeah.
have. Like, if you have an easily ability to get a job, then you can try your own stuff with far less risk. So no, I agree with you. We need more of an acquisition pipeline in that as well. But we're probably just a little early. I know, like Google X, for instance, is doing a lot of hardware stuff. You know, they're the ones who do like driving cars, the glasses, and stuff like that. But they don't. They seem like they will donate to stuff like this, but they're pretty close to the chest with anything else. So I mean, Leap might be one of the few. Leap Motion, the sort of body sensor, they've been seeming to get a lot of inside stuff with like Fortune like 10 type of companies, you know, real high-end ones. So it is possible. They have sort of a secret sauce they can sell.
Yeah, I think that's something that's missing in New York as well. Like just having these huge companies be like, we want to support hardware in New York.
I mean, it's funny. I guess we shouldn't go too much on this because there's other
Yeah.
things. But I mean, one of the ones was I know actually a New York company. There some people from San Francisco moved here, I think, because of server cooling for like financial like high-end transaction stuff. There was some kind of thing keeping them cool in a compact area was one of their things. So I don't know. I don't have enough to answer that question. I think you had a question.
Just expanding on that, when I spent time in South Bend, Indiana, for a very terrible reason, they've treated hardware startups very differently than you see in large cities like New York. And I think that it comes down to job creation and retainment. You don't retain people in New York when you start manufacturing because labor costs are too high and there's nowhere to put anything.
Okay.
In the middle of the country, they have the infrastructure built for shipping and for hardware factories and things like that. And also, they're kind of a little bit slower to jump onto the new software bandwagon. So you get a lot more of that out there. And if you want to get support in New York City, you get support from New York State because they know that you can manufacture in Rochester and still work in New York. But the city itself is more resistant to things like that, I found.
Okay.
What was your goal? You wanted to manufacture with 3D printing?
So I mean, not currently. So I mean, my opinion on 3D printing right now is that, I mean, if you look at sort of technology like the bleeding edge of 3D printing, it's not seeing the exponential gains that, you know, like computers are. Like there's a lot of, like everyone is saying, oh, look how cheap it's getting. So we're seeing regular like FDM style, like what a Stratasys machine would be, you know, 5 or 10 years ago, going very, you know, very precipitously down in price, which is awesome. So like prototyping is becoming that way. But there's huge material science challenges on actually getting parts that actually work. Like your Tupperware at home is made of vastly better plastic than any 3D printer produces right now, by and large. And for any, like, even if you drop the price of SLS powder, for instance, like 100x, it would still be crap compared to injection molded plastic. And that's sort of, we have to figure out, to me, material science is glacial compared to software. We already have traditional processes that do this. Let's make better software for those processes. And what I don't like about sort of 3D printing in general is we're like 3D printing, but in reality, it's digital fabrication that's the real transformative thing, like adding computers to the processes. So now we're seeing like the laser saw, right, doing the laser cutting, and I think as we start to pair off more real production processes is when we're really going to see this sort of modern production coming into effect. Because one of the things I see is that, and you have a supply chain, shoot.
What's your goal?
My goal? I want to make it so, I mean, like, you know, sort of Eric's goal in the same way. Like, how can we get companies to very easily get to the means of production and get iterations very quickly? Like, how can we make a hardware product like an iPhone app, where like an engineer can actually sit down, do this, and pound out a product and ship it? That's like, it's a far goal, but like in the end, that's mine.
Are you talking about like making finished goods with a 3D printer at all?
Not really. I mean, certain ones are, but I'm not focused on 3D printing right now. There's a lot of people that do that, but it's mainly through traditional processes, you know, injection molding, CNC, that kind of thing.
Getting back to the gentleman, you mentioned that New York doesn't have a Stanford or an MIT. I need help here. Isn't there a university like a Cornell teaming up with a university in Israel?
Yeah.
10 years out.
And the
But it's coming, right?
New York is way behind in many respects.
Well, it's
You
coming.
know, I mean, Stanford, you hit it right on the head when you mentioned Stanford. Stanford was out there directly leaps and bounds I mean, they are way ahead.
And I would also argue, to Sameer's point before, that the presence of companies, of hardware companies in the region, I think what you do is you end up getting engineers from those companies leaving and starting companies on their own. And I think that has a lot more, maybe transformative power. It's a lot, very transformative.
The other thing I would just add is classic hardware startups. Maybe, your definition of hardware and mine might be like your definition of a phone and my definition. Like I'm thinking of the black thing you pick up and you're thinking of an iPhone. So I might be antiquated. The traditional hardware startup needs lab space, and Manhattan is not really built for lab space, right? So when you look at Silicon Valley and Boston, there are no hardware startups in Boston and San Francisco. They're in the valley and in the circle, whatever that route is around Boston, they're in the suburbs, right? So hardware startups typically are not done in big cities because lab space is just so expensive.
It's interesting.
It's cost prohibitive.
So, I know several friends who, I think that in San Francisco at least, talent drives permanent location more than price per square feet. Like my friends, one of them has a company that, I don't think it's public, but they basically have to have like electron microscopes and sputtering, they're putting like big stuff in a clean room. And they're like right in the mission in San Francisco, which is, pretty expensive land. And it's mainly because all their engineers live there. And we see more and more people in the Soma, which is like right next to our downtown, getting tons of hardware companies in it. And the city actively wants to encourage it for that. I can see here, I'm guessing it's probably like 10x the cost. Like
I don't know the exact numbers.
Then again, I've been on like, 40th and Park, and there's a foundry in like the 3rd floor of a building casting jewelry, It's pretty crazy with all this smelting.
Honeybee Robotics is like 10 streets up.
Hell's Kitchen, 34th Street.
Yeah, they have a total, they have 2 clean rooms.
Isn't Adafruit here too? Like,
And
also, the NYC Center has the equivalent of a clean room on,
Yeah.
on the circle.
Yeah, we've got a clean room in Long Island City. We do our own manufacturing, CNC, everything. We have our own shop.
That's awesome.
And that's all in Long Island City. So there are places in the city where people are actually doing things.
Yeah.
But it's not as so much in Manhattan. You see things out in Queens or outskirts of Brooklyn, and you see a couple of places within the city, like Honeybee and a foundry you mentioned, which I'm trying to get into.
Is it Carrera? Carrera Casting?
Yeah.
If you let me know, I'll put you in touch with them. I'm sure everyone will get in touch with them.
Sweet.
Regarding John's comment about lab space, about the traditional hardware startup requiring a lot of lab space, I think one of the points about the digital manufacturing, if I said the right word, is that you don't necessarily need a lot of space to do things. You can dream something up, send the bits out, and it gets manufactured to someone else. If you're pretty clever, you don't need a lot of space to do it. You don't need to stink up the house to do it or whatever. You can. That's my experience.
No, I think you're right. Especially, even something like a tech shop like Third Ward, I was just out there yesterday, and that kind of space to me that's not all you need for most of these projects. An area to store your stuff in, some basic tools to, finish and test everything. Yeah, if you're doing really fundamental crazy stuff, then I'm sure that's what happened. I guess that's why all universities help, because they have that infrastructure. But for everyone I know, yeah, they're generally just like kind of tech shop level, I need grinders and a milling machine or something. It's pretty straightforward.
Yeah, but I think the real problem is getting from prototype to inventory. Even if you don't even have to have 10,000 units, I'm in the middle of this problem. I can't produce stuff to sell it. I've got something done. I had a failed Kickstarter project, right? I need to go to the next step. I can't.
Totally. No, this is
who wants to invest in my idea? It's a huge risk, right? In order to get the cost down, you have to make tens of thousands of these things. So who's gonna do that? It's a tough sell to convince someone to give me money.
For sure. No,
and
totally.
so, if I just wanted to get some sales, well, I can make 100 pieces, but that if I did it right with injection mold tooling cost, you all know how much that costs. What you're doing is the solution. So that's really what needs to happen. That's what makes it more like software development.
Sure.
A bunch of guys, I'm sure here there are tons of software developers too. Usually these skills, are cross boundaries, but I'm sure you could release some software in the internet and distribute it on the internet, and you could have it in users' hands. Now, I can't do that with my gadget.
Yeah. But no, it's totally true today.
But I think he's talking, you asked for the definition of hardware. He's talking about the definition of hardware is low investment, possibilities. Boeing makes hardware, but they make hardware you can't make because you're too small.
Sure.
Ford makes hardware, right? But what you call hardware is hardware for everybody, which is about the means of production. And 10 years ago, software was hard, right?
Yeah, sure.
You can make something small, but you want to go huge, there's no software as a service, there's no Amazon, there's no Google App Engine. You've got to hire some engineers in charge of databases. It's all crazy shit. You want thousands of users, right?
Sure.
Now, anybody can sign up for Google App Engine and do that. And that kind of transformation is what's going to expand the hardware community.
No, I'm totally with you, for sure. I mean, it's just a really hard problem.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right, well, I think on that note,
Okay.
thanks so much.
Yeah.